My name is Elin, and I was born into what the world considers a paradise. I grew up in Stockholm, Sweden, a place of clean air, social safety nets, and stunning natural beauty. By the age of 28, I was an architect, working for a prestigious firm. I had my own apartment in Södermalm, I spent my summers in a cabin in the archipelago, and I had a circle of successful friends. According to every statistic, I should have been the happiest woman on earth. But the truth was, I felt like I was suffocating in a vacuum. Sweden is one of the most secular countries in the world. We are taught that science answers the how, and that there is no why. We are taught that death is just a power switch turning off. The culture is built on extreme individualism. You don't burden others with your problems. And you certainly don't talk about God. My depression wasn't loud. It was quiet and gray, like a Swedish winter. I would stand on my balcony looking out at the lights of the city and feel absolutely nothing. I had freedom, but I had no anchor. The change began with a renovation project. My firm was hired to design a community center in Rinkeby, a suburb with a large immigrant population. I was the lead architect. I expected the area to be chaotic and difficult. Instead, I found something that confused me: warmth. I worked closely with a structural engineer named Fatima, a Somali woman who wore a jilbab. I used to look at her with a mix of pity and curiosity. I thought she was oppressed, wrapped up in all that fabric while I was free in my designer suits. But as weeks turned into months, I noticed something irritating. Fatima was happy. Not the polite, surface-level happiness we practiced in the city center, but a deep, grounded contentment. One afternoon, during a stressful deadline, I lost my temper. I was shouting about blueprints and permits. Fatima sat quietly, waiting for me to finish. When I stopped, panting, she didn't yell back. She just smiled and said, "Elin, the building will stand if it is meant to stand. We do our best, and we leave the rest to the one who holds the sky without pillars." "There is no one holding the sky, Fatima," I snapped. "It's gravity and physics." "And who designed the physics?" she asked softly. That question bothered me for days. As an architect, I knew that design does not happen by accident. If I see a building, I know there was an architect. I see intention, calculation, and purpose. Yet, when I looked at the complexity of the human eye or the rotation of the planets, I was forcing myself to believe it was all a cosmic accident. I started reading. I didn't tell anyone. In Sweden, telling your friends you are reading religious texts is like admitting you believe in ghosts. It's seen as a regression. I bought a Swedish translation of the Quran and hid it in my nightstand. I started reading with a critical eye, looking for errors. I wanted to prove Fatima wrong. I looked for the oppression I heard about on the news. Instead, I found the verses about nature. The Quran spoke to me not just as a religious text, but as a blueprint of reality. Verily, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, there are indeed signs for men of understanding. I remember sitting in my summer cabin, watching the waves crash against the gray rocks. For the first time, I didn't just see water and stone. I saw a signature. I saw the artist. The stark atheism I had been raised with suddenly felt incredibly arrogant. How could I claim there was no creator just because I couldn't see him? I couldn't see the architect of the buildings I admired in history books either, but I knew they existed by their work. The intellectual barrier was broken, but the social barrier was terrifying. In Sweden, conformity is a powerful unwritten law. We call it jantelagen, the idea that you shouldn't think you are special or different. Becoming Muslim was the ultimate act of being different. I decided to try fasting during Ramadan in secret. It was midsummer, meaning the sun barely set in Stockholm. The fasts were nearly 20 hours long. My colleagues thought I was on a detox diet. The hunger was intense, but the clarity was addictive. For the first time, I wasn't numbing myself with alcohol on the weekends. I wasn't distracting myself with endless shopping. I was present. I was hungry, but I felt full. The moment of submission happened in my living room. I hadn't taken my shahada yet, but I wanted to try to pray. I had watched videos online on how to move. I laid down a yoga mat because I didn't have a prayer rug. I faced southeast. I stood there, feeling ridiculous. My ego was screaming at me. "You are an educated European woman. What are you doing?" But then I bowed. And then I prostrated. When my forehead touched the floor, the vacuum I had felt for years vanished. It was a physical sensation, like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I realized that my independence had been a burden. I was trying to carry the weight of my own existence. In that sujuf, prostration, I handed that weight over to God. I whispered, "I am yours. You made me. Guide me." I took my shahada a week later at the central mosque near Medborger Platsen. The fallout was exactly as difficult as I feared. When I told my parents, my mother cried as if I had died. My father asked if I had met a man, assuming I was doing this for a boyfriend. They couldn't understand that I did this for my soul. "I raised you to be a feminist," my mother yelled. "I am," I told her. "I have liberated myself from the expectation to be a visual object for men. My worth is now in my relationship with God, not in my waistline or my hair." My circle of friends dissolved. In Sweden, so much of social life revolves around alcohol. After-work drinks, midsummer parties, crayfish parties. When I stopped drinking, I stopped getting invited. I sat alone in my apartment for many Friday nights. But I was not lonely. That is the difference. Before Islam, I was surrounded by people but felt alone. Now, I was physically alone, but I felt a constant companion in Allah. I started wearing the hijab 6 months later. That was the hardest step. Walking onto the subway in Stockholm with a scarf was terrifying. I felt eyes on me. I saw the confusion. I looked like a Viking. Pale skin, blue eyes, but dressed like a Muslim. People didn't know how to categorize me. I was a glitch in their matrix. One day, an elderly Swedish man sat next to me on the bus. He stared at me for a long time. I braced myself for an insult. "You look like a nun from the old pictures," he said. "It looks dignified. It has been 4 years now. The journey hasn't been easy. I still struggle with my family, though they have softened, seeing that I am still Elin, just a calmer, more patient version. I am still an architect. I still love the Swedish archipelago. But now, when I walk through the forests or look at the design of a skyscraper, I don't just see the material. I see the miracle. I traded the illusion of freedom for the reality of peace. I stepped out of the cold, gray vacuum and into the warmth of purpose. And for that, I would lose everything all over again.